Really quick before we get into this episode, I just want to throw a slight trigger warning out there because in this episode we do briefly mention sexual assault and sexual abuse. So if you don't want to listen to that, be wary. We don't get in details, it's just mentioned, as I said before, and also I apologize. For Felix's audio, it's kind of muffled, but it's because of the microphone. So I hope you guys enjoyed the episode nonetheless. Thank you. Hello, and welcome to the Kinda Queer podcast, hosted by a couple of kinda queer folks. My name is Ryan, and I am a cis pansexual man.
My name is Felix, and I am a trans man.
All right, so I guess the first question that I have for you is what is your story, giving away as much or as little detail as you want, when it comes to being trans?
Okay, my story. Well, when I first thought I was queer, I thought I was a lesbian because I I'm bi, and at the time I had a crush on a girl, and
Mm-hmm.
I grew up thinking I was a girl, so I thought I was a lesbian.
Mm-hmm.
And I sort of had this idea in my head that lesbians are butch, so I started wearing boys' clothes.
Mm-hmm.
And because of that, I was in one of those situations where everyone else could kind of tell that I was doing gender wrong before I figured anything out.
Uh-huh.
And so I was getting harassed for being trans before I knew what being trans was.
Oh, that sucks.
Yeah, and so it was through looking up the words that people were calling me that I sort of found out what being trans was,
Mm-hmm.
and then through a lot of time spent at the public library, um, I actually found this amazing book. It's called Refuse by Elliot Deline. It's a novel,
Mm-hmm.
and the main character is a trans guy, and it I related to a lot of what he wrote about, like in the novel, and so that sort of kind of was like the realization. I
Mm-hmm.
think I might actually be trans.
Yeah. Now, was this in where you were in school, and was this the other students that were harassing you that eventually you started looking up the words?
Yeah, yeah.
How old were you?
Well, I was 11 when I first realized that I liked girls, and it was around when I was 12 and 13, when middle school basically.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, the worst school of
Yes.
all schools.
Yes, I can agree on that.
When I started um like getting harassed for being queer, basically. Like in elementary school, I was kind of picked on, but that was more because I was autistic than it was for being being queer.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, middle it was like around I was 12, 13, and then when I was 13 was when I sort of had the real realization and started identifying as a boy.
Mm-hmm. I'm very sorry to hear that you had to go through that. When did you when you started when you realized that you were trans and you started presenting like as a man, how did how did that go over?
Well, it wasn't really so much changing the well, really what didn't I didn't really change my presentation much because
Mm-hmm.
like since starting middle school was that was the first time I was actually allowed to pick out my own clothes, and
Mm-hmm.
I sort of developed my own sense of style that was mostly just button down shirts and cargo pants.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I kept that. Like that wasn't really really it was more just I decided I wanted to change my name, and that was the main thing that changed.
So did you eventually So you changed, like, you decided to change your name, and who did you like tell people that you wanted them to call you by the different name?
Uh, my friends, um,
Mm-hmm.
and then one day I kept a journal with like really embarrassing poetry and stuff.
Trust me, I've been there before.
And one day my mom read it, and so then she sort of confronted me in the car and was like, "Is there anything you like about being a girl?" And I was like, "No."
Oh,
And so that was kind of how I came out to her.
mm-hmm.
Um, and then she told my dad, and so I didn't really have to come out to him. And so then that I was like sort of out. And so then I figured, all right, my parents already know. I can start trying to make them call me Felix now.
Yeah,
So that was a bit of a fight because you know my parents named me something, and
yeah,
then suddenly like I wanted to go by a different name.
yeah. I mean, I'll ask the question more generally, but I mean, I can already tell that like some things were definitely not good. How was your general coming out experience, whether like to your parents or to friends or other people?
Well, as I mentioned, like I didn't have very many friends to begin with because like I was getting picked on in middle
Mm-hmm.
school, and of the few friends I had, they were mostly girls, and so coming out sort of ended up like just with me distancing myself from them because I, I didn't want to like identify as a girl, and
Yeah,
so I kind of like had this idea in my head that like, okay, if I'm going to be a boy, I should become friends with the other guys. But the other guys were the ones that were harassing me, so it
yeah.
didn't exactly end up happening.
Mm-hmm.
So I was yeah, that was I mean I did my middle school did have a GSA, and I was a part of that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I kind of had like acquaintances from that,
Yeah.
and I had friends from outside of school. Like I had friends from summer camp, and I had friends that I'd gone to elementary school with who then ended up going to different middle schools. Um,
Mm-hmm.
One of them you actually already had on your show, Masha. Um,
Yes.
yeah, she was amazing. She kept me sane partially through middle school.
Well, that's very. I'm glad to hear that you had people that you could talk to and that you could rely on, because sometimes it's really hard to find those people, and I know for a long time I struggled to find those people as well.
Yeah, I mean, I've like I said, I'm autistic, so I just struggle with people in general, like making friends, keeping friends,
Mm-hmm.
and but then when I actually was able, like I kind of like officially came out like the summer between middle school and high school,
Mm-hmm.
and like my parents got me into a gender clinic, and so I started like things were moving in the direction I wanted them to be in.
Yeah.
And so in high school, I was able to like go to high school as Felix and like
Mm-hmm.
be a guy. And so making friends was a lot easier
Yeah.
then because it wasn't like a constant like fight against everyone.
Yeah. So was your high school experience like much better?
Yes, absolutely. It was what I mean, it helps that like my high school was a lot bigger than middle school, and there were other trans people there,
Mm-hmm.
and that so that helped a lot because I was able to like make friends that like actually like shared a similar experience.
Yeah, I definitely find that like I think for a lot of people, middle school tends to be one of like the worst experiences, because like that's when you're starting to like learn more about yourself and understand more about yourself. And It's really where a lot of people like come to like change and like turn into their own like person instead of like a person that everyone else wanted them to be. And also, I don't know how it is like in other schools, but from what I've heard and what I've seen, public schools, like the middle school, is just like a lot more condensed and confined. Like you're kind of stuck with the same people throughout. Like it's really hard to like break out of that and find more people.
Yeah. I mean, I I do have friends that had to go through like a K through 8 schooling in Brookline, and that is even more confined in a way because you're stuck with like the exact same people from kindergarten
Yeah.
to 8th grade. Um, and like middle school wasn't like entirely horrible. I mean, it was mostly horrible. I mean, like I got to do some stuff that I never would have gotten to do in elementary school. Like I sort of got to be a theater kid for a couple of years.
Mm. Yeah, I think it's always a good thing to like if you look back on some of the times that were just like really bad, really awful for you and just trying to find like the little positives, and if you can try and like focus on those a little bit, it certainly helps.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of a gift to be able to like look back on like awful stuff and try to like be like, okay, but if that had never happened, I might not be the same person that I am. You know?
Yeah, exactly. I think like a lot of things have happened in my past that have like dramatically changed who I am. And at the time, they were devastating. It was awful, but now I get to like look back on that and I get to reflect and I get to try and come up with the positives about it and see how it changed me for the better. And I think that's a good thing to be able to do, especially once you've like passed like a certain age where you're kind of more able to do that. Because
Yeah.
I feel like in middle school and younger grades, you're not really. It's really hard to have that mental maturity to be able to do that.
I know. I was actually in therapy my entire elementary and middle school,
Hmm.
uh, and so I like my therapists would always call me like an old soul because I'd be like, okay, this happened, and I don't like that it happened,
Hmm.
but
Yeah.
and then I'd like kind of like try to like find like the point of it because like I sort of like viewed my life as like a book, and like in books there's like morals kind of.
Hmm. Yeah, I I definitely can relate to the old soul comment. I've had
Yeah.
so many people, like so many adults, like say to me, "Oh, you're such an old soul. You're very mature for your age." It's like, yeah, because I dealt with a lot of shit, and now I've had to
Yeah.
get over that and deal with it.
And then everyone thought I was an old soul as a kid, and then now I'm like 20 years old, and my parents are like, "You're so immature. How come you don't know how to do the dishes? How come you don't know how to do this? How come you don't know how to do that?" And I'm just like, "I'm sorry."
Yeah, yep. Feel that. So another thing that you told me about yourself is that you are asexual. So when did you know that you were asexual, and or have you always known?
Uh, well, I didn't always know. Like like I said, I thought I was a lesbian.
Mm-hmm.
And then I realized I was trans. And then I there was a guy that sort of thought he could turn me back into a girl.
That's fucking horrible.
Yeah. Uh, and that experience sort of I just
Hmm.
I'm not sex is not a thing that I want.
Yeah, and that is perfectly fine. Sex is not necessary at all.
No. And so yeah, it was it it. I think it was around. I found out asexuality was a thing. My freshman year in high school, which
Mm-hmm.
was also the year that I had my first and only relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so and I mean, it was okay because he was also asexual. So um, it 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 worked out,
Mm-hmm.
and well, it kind of worked out. He was also a trans guy, but he was in the closet, and so there was a lot of stuff with that.
Yeah.
Um, and but yeah, then he broke up with me, and I don't like I've had crushes since then, but I don't think I can handle relationships.
Mm-hmm. Do you I've heard this from other people, and I want to ask your opinion on it. Do you feel like asexuality is often like treated as the invisible sexuality?
The invisible sexuality.
Like it's not often talked about. A lot of people don't know about it. It's kind of pushed to the side, like invalidated at times.
Yes, I do think that it like pretty much like I've taken a lot of like the of like those survey things that, like you fill out a survey and you earn points that you can then convert into money.
Mm-hmm.
And every single one that asks you about your sexual orientation, it's like gay, straight, bi, other.
Yeah. Yeah, I talked to um as someone, and I won't say their name, but I talked to someone a while ago who is asexual, and they said, like they weren't sure if people would want to listen to that or about the story because it's never talked about and it's like never really seen. And that I've never seen, or at least if I have, it was so minimal that I forgot it. I've never seen like an asexual person represented in the media, like in a TV show or a book or whatever.
I have, but I also like for a while exclusively read like LGBT fiction,
Mm-hmm.
like young adult fiction. So like I was actively looking for stuff like that.
Yeah. And also, when did you come to the decision that you were biromantic?
Around the same time I found out asexuality was a thing,
Mm-hmm.
because I was kind of like, okay, I might be bi, but also I don't want sex.
Yeah.
So if there's a way to be bi and also not have sex, I want that. And the internet was like, here, you can have this. And I was like, okay. And and yeah. So biromantic sort of fit.
Yeah. Um, so could you explain what like being biromantic means, like being a biromantic asexual means to the audience if they don't know what that is?
All right. Well, it's probably different for a lot of different people, and like I am not exactly the best representative of asexuality because I'm just one person.
Mm-hmm.
But biromantic basically is like I've had crushes on like girls and guys and non-binary people. So when I was first like learning about sexuality, I didn't know non-binary people existed, and so I was
Yeah.
like, once I realized I was trans and not a lesbian, I was like, okay, I guess I can acknowledge the fact that I also like guys.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I'm bi, and so I went with that, um, and then when I found out asexuality was a thing, and like I didn't feel the urge to like have sex with people that I had crushes on, I was like, all right, I guess I'm bi and ace.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I that did I explain it at all?
No, I think you did it well. Um, it's basically like, from my understanding, like you you're not necessarily opposed to being in a relationship with someone, right? But it's don't want a sexual relationship with someone.
Yes. Like I like kissing and I like the idea of like romantic stuff, but I don't want sexual
Hmm.
intimacy.
Yeah. And I hope that um, maybe if even one person watches this and they've kind of felt that they, maybe they don't want to be in a sexual relationship, I hope maybe this helps them realize that they don't have to have that.
Yeah, and doesn't like is not always like caused by something. Like yeah, I was had a traumatic sexual experience and that's probably partially why I don't want to have sex.
Hmm.
But not all asexual people have been through something and you can identify as asexual even if you've ever had any sexual experiences if you don't want any. Like you're allowed like you don't have to have tried something to know you don't want it.
Yes, certainly that is 100% true. So are there any childhood stories that you look back on, or like memories or things that you've seen, that you think that was probably a sign
Yes.
to anything in general, not just being asexual to anything?
My summer camp had a mustache parade. Um and I was really into it. Like I wanted to be like I had heard about like bearded women in like circuses and stuff and I was
Hmm.
like when I grow up I want that. I want to grow a mustache. And looking back on it that was definitely a sign.
Hmm.
That's the most vivid one.
Yeah, I think it's always funny, like looking back at things, right? Because with the perspective that you have like, today, I'm sure there's so many things that you could look back on and think, well, maybe. Um, just because, like, I don't know, a lot of things when you're younger, you just don't notice them or you don't acknowledge them, and so when you've come into that as you're older, you can kind of start to realize or notice those types of things.
Yeah, I mean it's kind of different for me because like I'm autistic, and so like growing up, like a lot of like I didn't recognize myself in mirrors, and like at least according to my mom, that's kind of like a stereotypically autistic thing.
Mm-hmm.
But like now, like being trans, it's like okay, yeah, that was probably an autistic thing, but also maybe that
Mm-hmm.
might have been had something to do with I don't know.
Yeah. So have you known for a long time that you are autistic?
Kind of. I mean, I've known for a long time that something was wrong with me in a sense that like I was in like special education programs and like I had like IEP reports that my teacher would give me to give to my parents that I would secretly read before giving to my parents.
Mm-hmm.
So through that I knew that like something was up and like the diagnosis changed throughout the years. And also my older brother is autistic and also cognitively impaired and so I sort of growing up associated autism with him more so than I did
Mm-hmm.
with myself. And it wasn't until I was 14 that like I actually had a doctor that would talk to me instead of just my parents um,
Yeah.
and told me like you it's not just your brother, you also have autism.
When you were told that, did it help you at all, like understand yourself better?
Yes, kind of. It. I mean, at first it kind of scared me because I, growing up, had always like associated autism with my brother, and sort of like by default considered myself the normal one.
Mm-hmm.
Um, which, uh, I mean, my parents also kind of put that pressure on me because I was the only child like living at home, going through the public school system.
Yeah.
But then suddenly but once like I sort of like came to terms with it and read a lot of books because that was how I came to terms with everything in my life.
Mm-hmm.
It did make a lot of things make a lot of sense.
That's good. Okay, so I wrote this down like as a question before, and I thought it was I amused myself with this. So I'm gonna read it word for word. POV, you're the other author of the gay dictionary. How has that influenced you?
um, a lot. We started writing it. I think it was like eighth grade, so it was like around the time I was realizing I was trans,
Mm-hmm.
or kind of coming out as trans. And Masha was no longer at the same school as me, and so the gay dictionary was sort of what kept our friendship alive
Mm-hmm.
when we weren't like physically able to like see each other for like months at a time.
Yeah.
Um, and it was also just fun because it was like, okay, I've been reading all these things for fun from the public library. Let's see what I can turn them into.
Yeah. And also, if you, the listener, do not know what I'm talking about, the gay dictionary, what are you doing with your life? I already did this up.
Episode 7.
Yes, go watch episode 7 after you finish watching this. Or I will sue you because you've hurt my feelings.
You maybe shouldn't do that though.
Yeah, I won't do that. I would not win that
My,
case.
my dad's a lawyer. I know all about what you
Oh.
need in order to sue someone. I don't think you'd. I bet that case would have no standing.
Hmm. Well, I will just have upset feelings, okay? I won't sue you for it, but I will have the upset feelings.
And he may not interview you later.
Yes, yes. And I know how much you want that.
Everyone should want that. These are fun.
Oh, thank you. So, I obviously you've talked a lot about like reading, how that like was like your go-to method to like figure things out. Have you always enjoyed reading? Has that always been a thing for you?
Yes. Um, yes.
So, do you think that is that what kind of led you to join in on the authorization of the gay dictionary?
Partially, yes. I was became interested in like languages and linguistics
Mm-hmm.
because I was taking Latin at the time in middle school. And there was reading a lot, knowing that a lot of the words that I had been learning in my life came from like Latin and Greek, and wanting to like get the history of stuff out there,
Mm-hmm.
because like the history of words is just like really fascinating. And like even though I'm not like as obsessed with linguistics anymore, it's still like it's fun.
Yeah.
Recently I've been more interested in editing Wikipedia than editing the gay dictionary, which
Mm-hmm.
I do both. And I have no intentions of like quitting. It's just it might be years. It's not gonna be like a
It's not like an essay that you write in like the 2 days before it's due sort of thing.
oh well, I never do that. I always write my essays weeks in advance so that I can edit and research and edit.
Mm-hmm. Well, you've certainly gotten me beat in that area because I am a heavy procrastinator and I do everything last minute.
I've never really been able to, because like as I mentioned, I was in like special education
Mm-hmm.
throughout, and basically what I was in for was I didn't know how to organize anything at all.
Mm-hmm.
Like I entered middle school not writing in paragraphs. Like I was that kid.
Mm-hmm.
So I always had to write things in advance because the teachers were always going to tell me that I needed to change stuff.
Yeah, that makes sense. And also you've talked a lot about like all your reading and everything, and you told me before, how has your interest in things related to queer theory influenced you, like in general? And have you been doing that recently, or have you continued to do that?
Yes, I've recently I read this book called Saint Foucault, which is a very, very interesting book about basically why queer people are drawn to Michel Foucault, the French philosopher,
Hmm.
and straight liberal type people tend to denigrate him. It's a very philosophical. I think my interest in queer theory originally came from my interest in philosophy,
Hmm.
um, plus like the fact that I was queer.
Yeah.
Um, and also like upon entering high school, I sort of like had this idea that I was done with reading fiction. Like I had read pretty much all the young adult fiction at my public library, and so I was like, I'm never reading fiction again. I'm going to exclusively read nonfiction from now on.
Uh-huh.
And the most interesting nonfiction books are like philosophy books, and like
I agree. Philosophy is very fun.
it is. It's. I'm friends with a philosophy major, and so I have some great conversations with him.
Oh, I'm sure.
It is. I mean, I'm not. I'm. If I hadn't fallen in love with biology, I would definitely be like a philosophy type person.
Hmm.
I mean, in a way, I kind of am because science is just a subset of philosophy, but like it's a different thing.
Yeah. Speaking of which, here comes the segue. Be prepared. Um, how do you relate your bio major to queerness?
Well, it's kind of hard not to, considering like I am trans, and so a lot of like my queerness is biology based in a sense,
Hmm.
and also like sex is just so much more interesting outside of like the human species.
Hmm.
Like it's wild. Like there's just so much out there, and so much that like gets ignored because people are just so self-centered, and
Hmm.
like you listen to like birds singing and it's like wow, and then you realize that most birds that sing are males trying to like attract females, and you're like wow,
Yeah.
why are why is heterosexuality so limited in people? Like when in animals it's like the cause of so much creativity, and then there are the animals that aren't just one gender, like slugs and snails
Hmm.
are just they're hermaphrodites, and they're just absolutely amazing. There's this form of mating called penis fencing.
Oh my god.
It's like a sword fight, and whoever manages to keep the penis attached to their body gets to impregnate the other. Um,
That is truly beautiful.
I know. I've seen it. I've I've gone outside. Like I think this was maybe last summer. Was during the pan. It was during the pandemic, so like there was nothing better to do than just walk around my neighborhood, and it had recently rained, and there were like these four snails.
Uh-huh.
It was amazing. I got a video of it. It was just I love other creatures so much, and like being queer, knowing that like okay, like I'm probably not gonna have kids. That's I don't want to, and I don't really think the world needs more humans. But oh my god, there are so many living beings that are so interesting, and I want to learn about all of them.
Yeah, I hmm I have a question for you. How how much do you despise the people that use like the excuse like, well, there aren't gay animals, so it's not natural.
Um, I feel bad for them. They have not spent enough time on Wikipedia. They do not know about the sneaker males and the parrotfish and there are just because you're not taught about it in like fifth grade doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And
Yes.
if you've never even like there are news stories about penguins, about like male penguins that couple off. Like even like monogamous birds, like
Hmm.
there are gay ones. Like you're not like the type of creatures that people like romanticizing have gay gay variants. And
Yeah.
like so like even if you're not gonna like learn enough to realize every single earthworm in existence is gay, almost all the slugs and snails
Mm-hmm.
gay. Like even if you're not like every single fungus in existence is basically like pan because
Uh-huh.
there are so many different sexes in among fungi. It's I fungi are wild. I yeah. Um I I I mean I part of me dislikes them because I know they're using that argument to try to argue that people that are gay are unnatural and therefore wrong, which
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I am like the epitome of unnatural in a sense because like I was made through artificial fertilization and also I was originally a twin and if it wasn't for abortion I probably wouldn't be alive right now.
Mm.
And also, I was born like 4 months premature. So if it wasn't for like medical technology and like artificial oxygen and stuff, I wouldn't be alive right now. So like, if things that aren't natural don't deserve to exist, then you want me dead, and I don't have to listen to you.
Yes, that is also a great piece of advice. You do not have to listen to people, especially if they are, just being rude or harassing you for the sake of being rude.
No, no, you do not. And that also goes for members of authority. Like, there are so many situations that have had been in my time in public school and also in medical settings that, like, people have more power than they think they do.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know. I don't remember. I don't really know what I was going to say other than like you don't always have to put up with being mistreated just because the person you're being mistreated by has authority over you. Like there
Mm-hmm.
are other options.
Yes, there are always other options, and I think that's important to know and to remember. Even if it's hard at times, there are always other options. And also to kind of add on to that, there are people who like expect you, like if they disagree with you and they're like being rude, they expect you to like have to debate with them, and you don't
Oh
have to
my
debate
god.
with them.
No, I made the mistake of basically like my entire sophomore year history class I was stuck with this guy
Uh huh.
who was very, very, very vocal about the fact that he supported Trump and also he just hated everything that I was,
Yeah.
and he expected me to debate with him. And for a while, I would, and I would keep getting in trouble because my teacher was just one of those teachers that you're both arguing, so it's both of your fault.
Yeah. I hate when like a teacher is like, this one person did something, so all of you are in trouble.
Yeah.
Or also if like if because sometimes you are very clearly like in the right. Like if a person is like, "Hey, Ryan, you're pansexual and that's stupid and I hate you for it." And I can be like, "What? No, let me explain to you why this isn't stupid." And like if I got in trouble for that as well, I I'm sorry.
You're disrupting the class, though, even though you're not the one who started it. So
Mm,
then, if you just ignore them, like sometimes they will not shut up. And in that time, I'm not gonna lie, there were days that I skipped class specifically so I didn't have to interact with that kid,
mm.
and I do not regret it, like at all.
Yep.
I knew how many classes I was allowed to skip before I would fail the course entirely, and I took full advantage of knowing the rules and using them
Yep.
to my advantage.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't have to put up with stuff like that. Like also like there were times when like there where I would have if I hadn't like forcibly removed myself from the situation and gone to like the guidance counselor and been like, if you put me in a class with this person, I will not show up.
Mm-hmm.
I will not go. I will not.
Yeah.
And if you refuse to play by their rules, sometimes, yes, you're just going to get in trouble and that sucks. But sometimes they will change the rules. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, their schools do have some investment in wanting kids in them
Yeah.
to get through that
Yep.
and come out on the other side with not always horrible opinions about everyone
Mm-hmm.
in the system.
Yeah. I also took full advantage of knowing the things, the rules, the amount of days that I could skip class. Like there were so many times in high school where um, I just didn't go to school, and like it wasn't just because I was, like being harassed or picked on, because that didn't happen too much, but like really for me, like my friends called them Ryan's personal days, because like I have and had a lot of like mental problems, and so like there were just some days where it's like, I cannot deal with like anything, so I'm just gonna stay home, and I know how many days I can miss, and I did that, and it was nice.
I didn't do that, but what I did do was when I skipped class, I didn't just like skip class. I would go to the library and read.
Yes,
I
perfect.
was taking advantage of the fact that like there was a library I had access to,
Hmm.
which oh my god. I can I just say
Yes.
the number one reason why I recommend people who like learning go to college is just academic libraries have so many more resources.
This is true.
I mean, that shouldn't be the only reason you go to college. And if you don't want to go to college, don't. I mean, unless, well, I don't know. The world's a messed up place. Obviously, right now, more so than usual.
Hmm.
But like, once you're out of the public school system, learning, for one, doesn't always have to come from like an official source. Like, I've taken amazing courses like through like community education programs
Hmm.
where I learned more in like 6, 7 weeks of like a drawing animals course than I did in like 4 years of art classes at regular school.
Yeah. Another question that I have is, do you feel, or have you ever felt like I don't know how to word this. Like that the trans community is often like one of the most like tumultuous ones, in that like it's often excluded from places, and like harassed even within the queer community itself.
Not the most because I was in a arguably polyamorous relationship,
Hmm.
and so I would have to say polyamory and dealing with polyamorous people is a more dramatic and tumultuous experience.
Yeah.
But also, like, I intentionally like don't go into parts of the trans community that I'm not, or parts of the LGBT community that I'm not wanted in.
Yeah, I think there's like a lot of gatekeeping within like the queer community, and I absolutely hate it.
Absolutely. In my experience, it's kind of similar to the disability community in a sense, because like it's a coalition of a lot of people with a lot of very different experiences and struggles and reasons for needing a community.
Hmm.
And like for example, like the trans community, at least in my experience, seems very, very similar to the deaf and hard of hearing community in that like there are people that exclusively view it as a medical problem
Hmm.
that should be fixed,
Yeah.
which I'm I myself am hard of hearing, and that was how my mom viewed me being hard of hearing was
Hmm.
like as a medical thing that like needed to be dealt with and or ignored,
Yeah.
on at least until it started affecting my schoolwork, in which case then I finally got to have a hearing aid, which
Hmm.
Wow, I did not know air conditioners made noise.
Oh.
But like, yeah, the difference between like people who need like a medical model of like say transness versus people who need a social model,
Hmm.
they're different needs. They both have valid like points in a sense,
Hmm.
but they're very different ways of viewing the world coming from very different experiences.
Yeah. I've seen, I've seen trans people who say like if you don't like want or like look for like the different things that trans people can go for, like, the testosterone or estrogen, or like the body like modification, like the like top surgery or bottom surgery, that they're not valid, and that's not true.
Oh my God, is that not true? But also, I do understand in a sense where they're coming from because a lot of people that view that were people who, like me myself, like when I was first like realizing I was trans, I very much appeared like between genders.
Mm-hmm.
Like people wouldn't know what to do with me. Like I literally got like physically removed from the girls' bathroom in
Mm-hmm.
school because I didn't look the part, but
Yeah.
also like wasn't allowed into the boys' bathroom for
Mm-hmm.
reasons. And like there is like actual like trauma that comes from not being viewed as who you say you are and also having a body that doesn't fit what you need it to be.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think like some of those people like take their former experiences and don't understand like why anyone would, for example, want want to be non-binary or
Yeah.
like because like their own experience of being treated as in a sense non-binary was being treated as a freak and being violently harassed, which
Mm-hmm.
is wrong and is like a legitimate in like in some ways like the social there is like a lot of like social pressures to look the part
Yeah.
and that in a way it's like I said, it's kind of similar to the disability community in that, like, there are people who all they want is to be able to fit into a society that's not made for them.
Mm-hmm.
And then there are people that want to actively change that society.
Yeah.
And both of those people have very real reasons for needing very different things from the world.
Mm-hmm.
It's just one of those sides argues for the exclusion of the other.
Yeah. And that is why I hate seeing gatekeeping so much in any community, like generally, because you can never like understand what a person is going through fully.
No.
You can have an idea. You might be very similar. You might be like you might have gone through very similar experiences, but you will never be the same person. And gatekeeping basically essentially just like invalidates another person's experiences. And I never want to do that. And I never want to see that, because you don't know what a person has gone through. You don't know how a person has, grown up. And every person is going to feel differently about something. And gatekeeping essentially says you're not allowed to do that.
Yeah, it's like it's gatekeeping is ridiculous in that it just I don't know. When I think about gatekeeping, I think about this whole like coronavirus situation and how like my brother lives in a group home and like most of like the parents of adults living in group homes for the developmentally disabled
Mm-hmm.
had to like really really petition like the Massachusetts government to get testing for these group homes.
Mm-hmm.
Like like the staff were getting tested, but the people living in them weren't, because they weren't like seen as high risk as like nursing homes, because they're not like as old, but like
Yeah.
they're still people, and the isolation's just ridiculous.
Mhm.
Like, I haven't seen my brother in over a year.
Yeah.
And stories like this are why there are probably people out there who don't think group homes should exist,
Yeah.
and think that like my parents should have kept my brother at home and like, I don't know, decided to care for him full time, even though that was not actually possible.
Mhm.
And like, he has a really great life that he enjoys.
Mhm.
There are a lot of problems that come from like taking some, like cherry picking experiences and using them as reasons to argue that institutions should or shouldn't exist or change.
Yeah. At the end of the day, the way that I see things is we're all just people. We're all just human beings. And the thing about human beings is they're drastically different, like from person to person. And so if you're going to exclude someone, just remember that they're a person too. And I get that they are horrible people. I mean, history has shown that. But, you know,
And oftentimes experience has also shown that.
yes. And, but don't let like those examples, drown out the fact that there are genuinely good people out there who don't mean harm.
On Wikipedia, like the number one like rule is to assume good intentions.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of other places, like on the internet, especially, like and like in queer communities, and like, yeah, in real life communities that I've been to, that's also sometimes like explicitly a rule, and I think it's a good one.
Mm-hmm.
Like, unless someone has shown themselves to not have good intentions,
Yeah.
generally you should assume good intentions.
Mm-hmm. That's the way that I try to think about things, especially when it comes to like, I don't know, people who seem like they may, like they've been, because there are a lot of people that have been doubted like their entire lives, and if you give them the benefit of the doubt, then they will be very grateful for that.
Yeah.
I also want to I want to go back to the biology thing, and ask, are there like any specific things about it that you are really interested in?
Insect, like entomology, like insects and spiders, and I absolutely love insects. I've honestly, that was my first ever obsession, and has continued to this day. I love them. I love learning about them. I love
Mm-hmm.
how tiny they are. I love how they're the first creatures to have evolved wings.
Mm-hmm.
And also, like, yeah, insects are just incredible. They're just so different from us,
Yeah.
but also like they, like, just thinking about experiences, like there are colors that we cannot see that bees can,
Mm-hmm.
and that both makes me really happy and really angry, because it means I'll never know what the world looks like from a bee's perspective.
Yeah. Um, I'm gonna ask this, and I hope you have an answer. Do you have like a favorite like insect or creature or animal,
Oh my god, a favorite. That is
or at
so.
least a few favorites?
I like. I really like long jawed orb weaver spiders.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I especially the green ones. I used to see them a lot up at Bishop's. Of which is the university that I go to slash was going to until COVID hit.
Mm-hmm.
I love them. I I I like aphids a lot, even though they tend to eat plants that people tend to value, just because they're interesting little buggers. They really are. They they can reproduce both sexually and asexually,
Mm.
which I like them. It's so hard to pick a favorite. I mean, it would be easier if you asked me like what my favorite vertebrate was, because that would be eastern gray squirrels.
Oh, that's an interesting choice. Why?
I see them so often, and they're just so smart. They they steal from dumpsters. They a bunch of them made like a nest in the tree next to my house.
Hmm.
Um, and they'd steal from our garbage. They climb fences. They they're just so smart and so different from us.
Yeah.
And sometimes when you look at them run, they look kind of like rabbits, and I just like them.
Uh, um, this is gonna be like a like completely random like reference, but have you seen Mark Rober's video where he set up like the obstacle course for the squirrels?
I have not, but now I want to.
Oh, you definitely should. With that being said, I have the ultimate final question for you, which is, do you have any questions, any things that you want to say to me, or is there anything that you want to say to the listeners, like give advice or anything of that sort?
Oh my god, I think I've like spilled my entire life out to the listeners already. Do you have a favorite animal? Um,
Do I have a favorite animal? Well, for as a I've always like loved fish. Um, and so like the easy answer for me would be, like a dog because I've grown up with dogs. I love Rottweilers, I love Labs, I love Huskies. But if we're going like with the not easy answer, I grew up. I always loved fish. My bedroom when I was a kid, I was like, oh my god, mom and dad, please, please make my bedroom look like the ocean. And so we painted my walls where like the bottom of the wall was like a dark blue, the top half of the wall was like a light blue to represent like darker water, lighter water. The ceiling was
yeah,
painted yellow to represent the sun. And then I had like fish things like put all over the wall. I had like a weird like net thing that I hung in one like ceiling corner. And so my go-to answer back then definitely would have been the barrel eye fish because I just think they're so cool looking. But really, I just like all types of fish. I have two fish tanks in my room, which, fun fact, I have to cover with like the tops of them with blankets. Otherwise, there's a lot of background noise for this. So they're covered in blankets right now. But uh, I really enjoy like flower horn fish because I think they're just funny. Um, and I love jellyfish. Yeah, that's my answer.
that is amazing. I am so glad I got to learn that about you. I feel like you told me a lot about your personality. Um,
Mm-hmm.
just fish, but yeah, fish are amazing. I mean, they are like arguably like they're our cousins.
Yes, that is right. I also the thing is like a lot of like I watch a lot of like video like YouTube and I follow a lot of like YouTube channels that cover like fish keeping and also like reptile stuff. So,
Oh yeah, I've got a pet leopard gecko. Um,
oh, what's their name?
Whoopi.
Oh my god. Yes, that's great. I just love animals. Like if I were like really rich, I would just own a bunch of animals. I'm just animals sometimes most of the times better than humans. I'll just say that, you know?
I I can agree. I mean, I've spent probably more time with non-human beings um, in the past year than humans,
Mhm.
and I can't really say I've been unhappy. Um,
Exactly. So do you have any more questions or anything that you want to say to the listeners?
um, Thank you for listening. I Sorry if I've gone off topic and not answered any question that you asked without realizing it, because my memory's not the best, so that might have happened.
It's fine. Yes. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Thank you, Felix, for joining me. It's been really fun. And this has been the Kinda Queer Podcast, hosted by a couple of kinda queer folks. Thank you for listening. Oh, I was going to say something and then I completely forgot. Wow. Yep. See, this is my brain. Sometimes it just doesn't function, you know?
That is, that's a thing that happens. I can relate.